All right, we're on, Irv.
Good to be back.
Good to have you again, man. So tonight, Irv, we're going to pick up on from where we left off. And last week we left off with after your first album.
Okay. Just to rewind a little bit, because as I was watching last week's, I realized I left out a couple people. Bobby, he's probably the biggest, the one cousin of all of us who's in music on my dad's side, who's made it the farthest in entertainment. Okay. He and I were inseparable growing up, and they lived right across the street, as you know, and so we were always calling each other, and we were always together. We came up learning music together and singing together, or he would sing and I would play the guitar. So yeah, I mean, he's actually been nominated for a Grammy, as you probably know, for Latino music, Tejano music, and so he's worked with some big names over in or down in Texas. He participated in a competition they were having for the group Fama a couple of years back, where they were looking for a lead singer, and he got the gig. Only, some of it fell apart because of the producer at the time. But he went ahead and released his own album, and it was that album that got nominated. So he's I'm really proud of what he's done and what he's doing. And aside from him, I have another cousin who works with Tejano bands in Texas, and his name's Johnny Davila. He's on my mom's side. He's second generation cousin, but he works with a lot of the entertainers, down in Eagle Pass and San Antonio. And then on top of that, I also watching last week's episode was nice, because I got to see. I kind of was feeling you kind of egging me on in certain directions, and I wasn't really catching what you were throwing at me. But growing up in high school, I went through a lot of anxieties, and what I would do, I had an extra class at UT, and what I would do is spend my time in the library, because towards the end of my high school years, my sister-in-law's brother, Ruben, had given me a CD of the Red Album by the Beatles. And that completely changed my life. Like, that was one of the biggest bands. It is the biggest band and my biggest influence to this day. Just to kind of juxtapose that with what we talked about last week. But yeah, I mean, to this day, they're huge influences on me, whether it's art, lyrics, music, everything. And I listen to Paul and John, as you know, a lot. And, to this day, I champion everything they do. So just so that
what do you remember about the Red Album?
That out, because that's a big part of kind of what hearing it for the first time. I remember looking at the back of the CD case and seeing Eleanor Rigby, and it may have been Help. And I think those were the two songs that stuck out to me the most. No, sorry. Love Me Do, that's what it was. Love Me Do and Eleanor Rigby. So, and I wasn't aware at the time of all these songs that I knew. You know what I mean? There was almost every single song on the album that I knew, that I was aware existed. But getting to Eleanor Rigby, I mean, I didn't know Eleanor Rigby. I think it was Love Me Do and Help that stuck out to me. And Yesterday, those three songs. Other than those, I didn't know what Norwegian Wood was. I remembered Eleanor Rigby a little bit, but I don't remember it being that dark a song. And that's when I started really paying attention to the lyrics of songs, and really listening and not just to the music, but well, now you can just search on a phone really quick what the lyrics are. Back then it wasn't like that, so yeah, that's what I remember most about the Red album, was just being completely blown away by it. And I remember listening to it for weeks on end. So yeah, and, it's been a while since I heard that one, but since then I've listened to every album. I think that summer was like the Beatles summer. I mean, if you talk to Daniel, he'd probably tell you he remembers that summer. So yeah, and that's what led us to, it was Kiss and, the Beatles, and then a mishmash of everything else. So yeah, now moving forward, I think we left off on, it was Jigaroo, right? The first album?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So I think we talked about some of the shows we did. Towards then that winter, that it was September that we released the album. Well, that winter, my cousin came into town to visit, and we were just off of, doing some shows. And I just so happened to meet this girl, and, long story short, in that summer I moved to Texas. And while I was in Texas, I was there for 3 years, and I recorded an album. And the Dispatch even interviewed me, and I had the album done. I was about a month away from mastering it. And as you know, in that time, like we were talking about Ruby and these programs being new and the digital format being new for music, I really didn't know what I was doing at the time. And long story short, my computer crashed, and so did the album. I lost the whole album. So, and that was devastating. It was just, because, like when we record now, there's things that happen that you don't plan on happening. And if you try to duplicate it, you can get lucky, but there may be something that happened in that magical moment that you're just never going to get back. And so a lot of that was on that album. And, I still have some of the tunes. Some of the tunes have already been re-recorded for the albums, but there's still some songs there that I have in my catalog, or whatever you want to call it, to go to in the future. So living in San Antonio, really, I was pretty much just playing music at home, but all the time. And so when I moved back, I was probably back for about a good year. And then when I came back, Gus was still living here, Tavo Jimenez. And I started hanging out with my cousin, started hanging out with me a lot, searching me out, coming over all the time, hanging out. And we have a good friend, Joaquin Pena. And we were hanging out with him a lot at the time. And we'd go over to his house. And this was about the time that the movie Ray came out. And I started getting really, really into playing keyboard again. And, accompanying, because what we would do is we would have jam nights at Joaquin's house, because Joaquin liked to sing along with us. So Gus and I would either take both of our guitars, or we'd take a piano or a keyboard and his guitar. And so if he was playing guitar, sometimes I'd jump on the piano. And so we'd fool around, and then Jesse was coming along with us. And it got to the point where Gus was basically like, dude, you're hanging out with us all the time. Why don't you, try to learn an instrument or something? And then so slowly, without us even really thinking about it, this new version of Jigaroo, if you want to call it, this trio started, to materialize. And so we started getting ready. And basically what Jesse did was he bought a drum set. He didn't know how to play it. So I started playing it. And Gus would come over with his guitar and his amp. And I started writing bass lines to what Gus was writing. But when Jesse would come over, I'd jump on the kit. So what Jesse did was he bought a camcorder, and he literally got behind me. And so I'd be playing, he'd be right over my shoulder recording me. And so he went and watched that video and literally learned beat by beat, tom by tom, what I was playing. You know, which is kind of crazy because it's either ingenious or just crazy, because I don't think I ever would. I mean, that would almost be equivalent to us learning guitar by recording somebody. You know what I mean? But he did it.
Right.
He did it. And before we knew it, he was a little choppy, then tighter and then tighter. And, you know, he got it down. And we probably went a good year, if that, maybe 8 months later, I think Jesse. But see, Jesse learned our beats. Like, he learned our songs. He didn't, you know, he wasn't playing much of anything else at the time until we really started rolling. And then he started, you know, branching out on his own. But he really started getting the sound down and you know, the fills. And it got to a point to where I was, you know, kind of nudging Gus to be like, you know, let's do this. Let's go out, let's start playing. And just by coincidence, you know, my brother was visiting town on a Thanksgiving, and we went to Bent River. And just by coincidence, we ended up there on an open mic night. And we were having a few beers, and I remember looking over to Gus and being like, dude, like, they're bringing the equipment in right now. And I was like, you keep saying, you know, you want to play live. It's like, well, there's no time like the present. You know, kind of putting him on the spot. And he at first, I think he thought I was joking. And then it kind of turned it into like me kind of like, you know, kind of like just badgering him, like, you know, like, if you want to put your money where your mouth is, I'm ready to go. So we did. We went up, and I got him to put our name on the paper and everything. And then, you know, well, what are we going to call ourselves? Jigaroo, you know what I mean? So we put Jigaroo down. We went up and we did a song that he was working on called Be Cool, I believe. And we did In a Little While by U2. Because that was one song we were doing a lot at the time. By then, that summer that I was in San Antonio, one of the summers I was over there, I really started getting into U2. And we both liked All That You Can't Leave Behind, that album. So we learned that, you know, In a Little While is on that album. And we played that, and people liked it. You know, we got a really good reaction. So what we did was we went back to rehearsals, and we told Jesse, like, you know, they got this open mic night. We can go and play it next week. So we rehearsed. We rehearsed for it. We went, played 3 songs, and they loved it. Next week, we went over to, we found out about this open mic night at 11th Street Precinct, and in the Village there in East Davenport. Same thing. And so we went back the next week, and we just kept going back. And before we knew it, we were building a little crowd. And so we started, you know, writing again and going through the whole process again. Before we knew it, we had an album. We were back in the studio. And in the middle of, you know, we really had momentum swinging our way. And just before, well, during our rehearsals, you know, my dad found out he had cancer. And so when we went into the studio, his health was deteriorating. And then while we were in the studio, he passed. And so you can hear in the album where, you know, some of the songs start getting really spiritual, and that was really in tune with what we were already doing, because Broken was conceptually, you know, about being broken, and, you know, a lot of that stuff dealt with some dark matter. And Gus was always really into, you know, dark stuff, and you know, just like, you know, when Paul McCartney talks about John Lennon, you know, it's always vice versa. We were very much like that. So, you know, I had Believe, which was, you know, spiritual, and he had Murder on Requiem Scott. And I mean, everything we really tried to build a concept with this, you know, with it being spiritual, you know. And I also wrote another song called Cynical Tongue, kind of to mimic what he was doing. And we also had another song called Akeldama, which was, you know, it's from the Bible, but it's another dark, you know, it's basically, from what I gather, it was what they used Judas's money with, to its land that they used to, that they bought with the money that Judas gave back to, you know, the Jews. And so, yeah, you know, we really wanted it to be what it was. And then once the album came out, we really started getting more attention again. And, you know, we were playing, we started gigging a little too much around the Quad Cities. You know, we played Ripco, we played Redstone Room, you know, basically any place, you know, your cousin Kenny's place, Rascals. Kenny had us quite a few times. But the only reason I say that we were gigged here a little too much is because we got to a point where we were almost playing every day. I mean, or if we weren't rehearsing every day, we were out playing. And well, when you're playing all the time in rehearsals, it's always friends coming over. It's always a good time. You're always drinking, you know, whatever. Then you go out and the bars give you tickets for free drinks. It's just never ending. It got to a point where after I got married, Jessica kind of was like, we need to we need to hit this on the head. Mm-hmm. And I agreed with her, because it was like, this is getting way out of hand. And this goes again, ties in with the whole keeping yourself grounded. You know, your head kind of starts getting a little too big for your body. And so with that came, you know, we started getting calls to be, we did this gentleman's documentary called, what was it called? I can't remember the name of the show, but it was like a documentary where he had an undisclosed location was the name of it. We did that, and we got invited by Ripco to go do this Battle of the Bands deal, and we did that. And you know, the Battle of the Bands was fun for us because there were a lot of people that showed up to our some of our Ripco gigs, especially the Battle of the Bands, because everybody's there. And then we got invited back to do another show, and it was, you know, things were definitely going in the right direction, but it was just too much ego. You know, we were very much like brothers, and we looked for reasons to kind of pick at each other, and it just got to be too much. We're to a point to where I think Gus wanted to go in a certain direction, and I already come to the point where I was like, I'm not really doing that anymore. And so it just became aware that for the time being, or for whatever, we needed to split ways. And I, of course, was, you know, I knew that I could do it again, because I knew I had Jesse and the people that were already wanting to come into the group. One of them was already learning with us. And so just inviting another member in, which was Adolf DeHaro and Caitlin Estes, inviting Kate into the band. It would be the first time that we actually had a live keyboard. So that was going to open up another road for us. And that's exactly what it did. So shortly after, you know, we parted with Gus, we didn't stop. We kept the momentum going. You know, which I kind of feel a little bit bad for Kate and Adolf, because there was no resting time for them. They came in and they started learning. I was writing new songs. So as we left the Requiem Scott stuff, I started writing new stuff. So they started learning this new catalog of songs that were going to be the next Jaggeroo. And so we were back to being a 4-piece, but I was now on the bass. No, I went back to the guitar. Sorry, in the trio I was playing bass again. or bass for the first time in the band. I went back to playing guitar, sorry. And we started learning this new music. Well, with new music and new members comes a new crowd, you know what I mean? And then, you know, once they started listening and going back, we were able to go back and show them what we did in the past. And, but it was very much like starting anew because, you know, they were real new to the whole playing live thing. And it's a new introduction to not just their friends, but everybody who already knew who Jagged Rule was as a trio and as a quartet. And this is just a totally different, you know, lineup and with a new instrument. And now there's, for the first time, a female in the group. And because Kate had a beautiful voice, she has a beautiful voice. And throwing her stuff in on top, her voice on top of mine, it was just, it sounded really good. But they were very much like Jesse, learning, you know, their parts. And they were learning the songs as we were going. So as they were learning the songs, I decided that it'd be a good idea to start tracking some stuff. And so with that came the idea of doing like an exclusive. We did 3 songs for Garage, which was also a small, you know, concept. But yeah, that's where we were with that lineup.
Okay.
I feel like I've just been
Well,
talking.
let me back you up here.
Barely.
Yeah, let me back you up here to
Yeah. Yeah.
let me back you up here and just try to get the timeline down here. So you guys had put your first album out.
Yeah, sure.
And you guys played over that, and we talked about that last week. Like, you guys went to Chicago and did some gigs in Texas.
Yeah.
So after that,
sure.
Did all of you just kind of let it go then? And that's when you moved to San Antonio for a few years? You guys just let it end?
Well, I kind of knew, because what it was we did those 2 gigs and then we came back. And once we came back, we did a few gigs here. But then, yeah, I mean, like, that momentum we had kind of started slowing down a bit. And the initial idea was to move to San Antonio, and then Gus would meet me there in a year. But I come back in a year, and it turns out that, he was planning something different, and then that wasn't going to come into fruition. And so then that's when I realized, well, I went back to San Antonio, and I realized, well, I'm going to be here, and in order to keep this thing going, I need to start recording something. And that's when the idea, the concept of the album I recorded in San Antonio came about.
Okay.
So that's where that was.
And then when you...
And then I came back in. Go ahead.
No, then I was just going to say, and then you came back here.
Go ahead.
And then you came back here, and you and Gus then started working together again.
Yeah, that was in 2004. So when Jesse was learning, that was between 2004 and 2005. Okay, because my dad got sick in 2005. That was the summer of 2005, and so that was the summer we were rehearsing the new music. And in 2006, we were in the studio, and that's when my dad passed. So 2 years later, or a year and a half later, was when Gus left the band.
Okay.
And as we were recording the album, Adolf was going with us to the studio, and he's the gentleman who became our bass player. And again, Adolf learned like Jesse did, note by note, and Adolf was he wasn't officially in the band, but he had been practicing bass and jumping on the bass for a good 5 months. And it just started happening, like Jesse hanging out with us all the time. Adolf was doing the same thing. So little by little, Adolf's ear was getting better and he was figuring it out. So yeah, and then when, like I said, when Kate came in, you know, we had a new crowd. It was a new sound. She had a very, very complimentary voice. And so her and I harmonizing a lot, that became a new area for me to look for hooks as far as the lyrics went, you know, because it's just that something that happens when you have two good voices that go together. And then again, we started tackling deeper meanings. It was the first time we incorporated somebody speaking in our album, A La Mirror. You know, but it was the first time we did it in a song, where we dropped in a clip from Charlie Chaplin. And then I started realizing, oh, well, you know, I can play with this in the future, which was a plan, you know, from that point on. But yeah, man, it was a really fun little project for us to do, and it was another 3 songs we could add to what we had already had. But in a funny way, it was very much a chance for me to be like, I almost felt like some of the people wouldn't buy this new lineup because nobody knew who they were. But it gave me a chance to say, well, okay, these are some songs that we wrote with the new lineup, and as you can see, these songs go together with the last couple albums, you know, just as well as, you know, or they go well with Broken just as well as the last album did. And so, and then again, we got the chance to start playing these gigs. I remember our first gig was at Augustana. They have a cafeteria there. We got booked there, and then I think the live show started building them a little confidence, because as you do, you get your first gig under your belt, and you're kind of like, I'm looking forward to the next one. Oh, now we got to start booking, you know. And so we did, little by little. We keep our ear open for any gigs that were available. And I really didn't want to present the band to any of the bigger clubs yet, because I felt like we needed to rehearse, and we did, and it got better as you do. And we really started focusing on the promoting a lot more, taking more pictures, a lot more video, and about, I want to say, about 2 years later, as we were doing this, you know, in that time, I was approached by another musician from the Quad Cities here in Silvis, who writes his own music, and it was Steve Suka. And he told me, he said, you know, I heard he was talking about Garage. I heard your album, the 3 songs. I really like what you're doing. And for me, that was like, you know, I achieved what I wanted to, which was convincing people that this lineup was just as good as the others. And he was a writer. And for me, Jagger was always been about working with somebody else. You know what I mean? That wasn't happening with the new 4-piece. It was just me writing, and I was looking for something. And so Steve coming on board was perfect, because he could feed us some ideas. And I'd done some rehearsal with Steve before, working with him, introducing some songs that Gus had written, and he heard some Jaggeroo stuff in the past. And he had introduced some of his music to us. So working with Steve was something that I kind of wanted to take on, because of the idea that I told you before. When somebody brings something to the table, I like writing over the top of that.
And so then, did you guys start writing?
We did. Steve's really good at crafting a song, and he was able to do with my songs what I had never done before, which was hear them out and really step away from them and like think about the actual structure of the song. Because he would, a lot of the times, he said, "Will you ever think about doing this? Or don't bring the chorus in there yet. You know, carry the song longer, or cut that out and shorten it to here." And it seemed to me like every time he did that, it just worked. It was, I could hear it, you know, because I feel like, because I was so like, I didn't have a writing partner at the time, and I felt like I was trying to control things a little too much, that I think somewhere along the way I wasn't really paying attention to some of those ideas that may have been getting by me, or I wasn't even really thinking about. And I always admired that about Steve. And the other thing about Steve that came into the group with him was he's really good at effects on his guitar. He knows what effect to use. He knows, you know, what sound to use. You know, you use pedals, don't you?
Here and there.
Yeah. See, and I here and there, right? Oh, did I give away your trade secret? Yeah, and so, you know, where I may have not heard a delay, you know, he'd suddenly throw that in there with his guitar, or he'd suddenly get his slide out, or, you know, whatever it was, you know, we'd all kind of like, our ears would go up as soon as he'd do something. And I feel like Adolf was really starting to come along. I mean, he was a big fan of Muse. So he was really, you know, experimenting with some of what he'd never been doing before. I feel like sometimes he felt like he was raising the bar a little too high. And I think he kind of would get like a little bit intimidated by that, but then he'd jump back on it and he'd catch his footing. So, so yeah, I mean, that was fun bringing Steve in, because then we really started approaching the recording thing more. And so again, we'd go in and, you know, we'd try to do it on our own. And it became really taxing, because again, it was almost like we were really gung-ho to go into the studio with this particular lineup, because we were doing it in the middle of gigging, and then all of a sudden we were thrown this opportunity to join another competition. We were always joining competitions one way or another, but they had a 72 band competition for Channel 8. So we said, well, what the heck, we'll throw our hat in, whatever. And it was to open for River Roots. There was a competition that Redstone Room and WQAD were putting together. So from the 72 bands, they would pick 12. So we got picked somewhere in the 12 bands. And then we were really going to figure out whether or not, I don't know if you want to say whether we were any good or whatever, but.
What year was this, Irv?
Go ahead.
What year was this?
So this would have been 2013, 14. But it was, yeah, about 2014. I may be wrong. I'll correct it on Facebook. So we did, and we got, they brought it down to 12, and then it would be like an online vote. You know, the people would vote. So I think they picked four bands, I believe, and we got picked. And so after the online voting, it was going to be a live vote at Redstone Room. So we got there and, you know, got all our gear there, whatever, getting ready for the gig. And I think by then, for me, like doing the contest thing, it was redundant, you know what I mean? So for me, it was just another go. But we performed that night, and that night was just one of those nights that I kind of felt like we performed better than the other competition. And well, the crowd thought so too, because we got voted in. So we were like, you know, we're doing the River Roots, which was going to be cool, and it was a really cool experience. Because along with that came going on WQAD, which we did, but nobody heard my voice because they didn't have the output going right or something. But we did that. And then we opened River Roots, which was really cool because they treated us like we were one of the acts or whatever. But we opened so we did the sound check for the bands is what it was, you know. But it was a good good exposure. You know, the news channel showed up, they interviewed us backstage, and you know, yeah, just another experience for us. So that happened in July, I believe. Yeah.
And so how many albums have you released over the years?
So we tried to work it out as best we could as this group, but for some reason something just kept falling in our way. We probably started the project 3 or 4 times, and by the 5th time, you know, as you do, but like I said, it started becoming egos again, and we were each fighting each other, and we couldn't make that magic happen when it came to recording. So we just kind of started having a lot of static, and we just weren't being able to work well together because, like, again, as you know, you start becoming brothers and sisters, you know, with your bandmates. And, you know, the biggest red flag for me was, I'm sure you know that I worked with Tarcisio on Hola America, Macias, was when I was talking to him during doing one of the jobs that I was doing for him. And he just said, how's the band? And, you know, and I just kind of, oh yeah, we're recording whatever, we're trying to record. And he goes, seems like there's been a lot of fighting. And I'm like, if he knows, you know what I mean? Like if people are starting to look through this veil or whatever, or see past the veil, then there's a real problem going on. And yeah, sure enough, we couldn't do it together, man. And then that thing that happens when you're in a group with your family member, you know what I mean? That came to a head as well. And we suddenly came to the realization that, you know, Jesse and I aren't going to work well together anymore. You know what I mean? And so now our other members are stuck in the middle, because if they decide to go down this road, they're not going down this road. Is it betraying the other one? You know what I mean? So now we don't want any part of that. You know what I mean? So I kind of just put it out there because I was really getting frustrated at the time with what I felt was like people being wishy-washy and just not being, I want this and I want that. And me being, you know, where I was, I said, well, I can put an end to it really quick. And my, you know, passive aggressiveness started coming up, and it's like, you know, I had to cut the head off the chicken. And I knew though that, okay, well, I'll take a break, you know, and if this is really meant for me to keep going, then it'll come back around, you know. So yeah, man, I settled down. You know, with my family, I had my boy, as you know, and I started getting the itch again. I started rehearsing in my garage. This was probably 3 years ago, about 2.5 years ago, I started getting the itch. Started playing more piano. I had a piano in my house now. Started doing little recordings, was writing again. And then I kind of got to a point where it was like that Gus situation at Bent River, where it was like, okay, now you can, you know, put your money where your mouth is. So I reached out to Dude, you know, Manny, Miguel, because I knew I had some new songs that I don't know what it was. I think it was fear of starting this new project and then losing it again. You know what I mean? Because I knew I could produce something, but I still had that doubt of losing it again. And so I reached out to Dude, and he got back to me. I said, hey, I got these songs, you know, and it was The City. And The City, I recorded another song called Please, or not Please, forgot the name of it. It's in my catalog, bro. It was The City and Alone. Stupids. That's the name of the song, Stupids. So I did these 3 songs, well, 4 songs, and I abandoned one, but The City was the first one I did when I went with him. And I started getting, you know, into the groove. I jumped on all the instruments, did my thing, and then when I went to do Stupids, it's a really, like, you got to scream the song. And I've always had this thing where when I'm in the studio, I kind of psych myself out vocally. And I can never record my voice the way I want, you know, like you record your voice and it always sounds velvety. But no, I couldn't do it. You know, like I said, I psyched myself out a lot. And so, you know, and I struggled with it. And the other tune, for some reason, it was fighting me. And so I was just I was in a funk there with Dude, and, you know, Dude's just doing the recordings and, you know, manipulating some of the wave files. And then and I tried to sing Stupids and I couldn't. You know, I was trying to scream it, voice is cracking. Dude's in the other room laughing, you know what I mean? And it's like, sweating, you know what I mean? And so I came out and I knew that it wasn't working for me, not Dude. There was nothing Dude was doing, because everything, you know, he made me chorizo and eggs and all that, you know, when I went to go visit him. But something happened where I think he said, grab the guitar or something like that. But I sat down with the guitar and I said, you know what? I do have this tune. And it was Alone. I just started playing it, you know, and he already had an effect on the microphone. He hit record, and I did it in one take. And then he was like, yeah, dude, like, that's, you know, that's cool. And I was like, that was, you know, we had a moment there. So he was working on other projects at the time, and me going to Galesburg all the time, because I was recording at his place, wasn't really an option for me, you know. So I kind of, you know, he was telling me too, because the one thing that Dude did that, you know, kind of sparked a fire in me was, you know, he reminded me, like, dude, I'm just sitting and record, man. You're doing the rest, you know, and I'm fixing things here, but that's all you. And then that light bulb went off, like, you know, yeah, why am I not approaching this from a producer's standpoint? So then he started telling me, look, I'll send you the files, and then you can start manipulating them there in, you know, in the Quad Cities. So he did. He started sending them to me. I started listening to them. And initially I was going to repeat Garage. But then as I started going and as I wrote the 3rd song, there was something calling me to make it a full-length album. So after about a year, I finally released the final track, which would have been the 3rd song, thinking I was just going to abandon it. But then, you know, this was at the end of towards the end of last year. So then I started hearing, you know, I'm kind of basically moving on with my life. And I started hearing this thing about, now let me back up a little bit. As I was approaching the end of the year, as you know, I started walking in the woods through trails. And I just had like a very profound thing happen to me. And, you know, kind of started finding myself out there. And, you know, as you do, you know, you keep doing it and things start changing. And that's exactly what started happening. And you know, I kind of, you know, mentioned it to Jessica, and, you know, we started having issues. And I kind of, you know, I knew that eventually, one way or another, I was going to be figuring this thing out on my own. And so I did. And, you know, I started doing some more searching for myself. And so then through that, I started getting some new melodies coming to me. Well, I was walking, and, you know, I grabbed my phone, record the melody, go back home, listen to it, and just grab the guitar. And then before I knew it, like, okay, well, that's, you know, I hear this on the piano now. And before I knew it, I had one song, then two songs, and then I started hearing about this pandemic that was about to come over, you know. So I started recording. The next song I recorded was Lost in the Dark. And that's off of One, as you know. And then after that came another tune, and then another tune. Then we were on lockdown. I said, well, this is the perfect time. And then before I knew it, you know, it all led to here. To Troy Rangel saying, hey, you want to be on my podcast? And so, I mean, yeah, this last album has been, it's been a real eye-opener. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's changed the game. I never thought I'd be in a position to now start reaching out to some of these people who I think will probably be the best lineup that I've ever had. That only because of the way I approached it. Now it's done. I put it out. People have heard it. You know, kind of threw a Hail Mary pass in the hopes of getting some of these musicians who I brought on board to say yes. And luckily for me, you know, I think, you know, that's going to come into fruition soon. So here I am, man, wrapping up this video for Milk and Honey Way, you know, which is, you know, kind of a little bit of an enlightenment. If you go back and look at the early Jai Guru stuff where it was dark, now it's actually transitioned, kind of like life imitating art, or art imitating life.
Yeah, and just to clarify, where did the name come from?
Jai Guru, as you know, was always kind of like a tip of the hat to the Beatles. We couldn't. I think with Mirror just kind of happened. We literally were looking for a band name, and it was like I turned around, saw a mirror, said Mirror. You know what I mean? It was just kind of a kooky way of finding the name, but. You know, we were getting into this whole, you know, because not only was I listening to the Beatles, I started listening to, at the same time, around about the same time I started listening to the Beatles, I was turned on to the Doors too. You know, little by little, my taste started shifting to not just rock, but British rock. I started listening to The Who, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, and to this day, you know, Oasis. There's something unique about the whole idea of R&B and pop rock from way back when Chuck Berry was doing it, Fats Domino was doing it, that whole Jim Crow era. And the reason being is because those musicians weren't accepted here in the United States. They had to play, you know, specific gigs for specific culture. But it's a funny thing that happens when we export that music and another country grabs it, you know, like the Beatles did. They learned it. They were doing the same thing that I and many other musicians and artists do by listening to stuff that comes from over there. They were doing that with our stuff. So when they got the Beatles and Fats Domino, or not the Beatles, but Fats Domino, Little Richard and all, They learned it. But when they came over here, then it was accepted. When they saw it performed by 4 white guys, it was perfectly fine. It was the same music, just 4 polished white kids. You know, I always thought that was very, very ironic. You know, but yeah, so kind of the same thing. I listen to a lot of that music, and even now, I kind of tend to seem to think that they're getting something right. You know, and some of the American music that I do listen to is kind of, it falls in line with that. You know, the White Stripes. You know, Jack White is very, his mind is kind of wired that way. But yeah, man, it's just funny how that happens. But yeah, so as we were trying to get this name, we were thinking, oh, it's got to be deep, it's got to be philosophical, it's got to be, you know, because we were listening to a lot of these deep bands, and you know, Dark Side of the Moon, and playing it with the Wizard of Oz and all that. We were looking through a songbook that I had of the Beatles. I remember Sean Yeager standing over my shoulder, and I was looking through it, just flipping through it, and I stopped on Across the Universe. I was looking at it, and
was that my songbook I let you guys borrow? Was that my songbook I let you and Daniel borrow years ago?
Oh no, it might have been. Did we keep it?
I never got it back.
Did we really?
It was the Beatles.
Oh man,
the Beatles Complete.
I owe you a book. I owe you a songbook. I never noticed that. Well, it's gone, Troy.
That's all right. That's all right, man. Ain't no worries.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, but I remember, you know, Jai Guru Deva Om, and I knew Deva Om was going a little too far. I said, how about Jai Guru? And then everybody was like, yeah, you know, like they liked it. But the funny thing about it is, we were talking about the whole Spanish English thing. We got played at St. Ambrose again, but on the weekend, one of the DJs for the Spanish station there had us come on the show, and he was, you know, one of the interviews that we did, and he was talking to us. He was playing Paloma. They were kind of trying to pump up the Viva Quad Cities thing. And I remember him saying, okay, that was Jai Gurn. Couldn't say it, you know. It was either, every time we got an interview with a radio station that was in Spanish, they could never get the band name right. We went too dark, too deep.
When me and Phil and Bloomy and Dude and Kathy, when we formed the Shades back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. The Shades. Mm-hmm.
We used to practice at Bloomy's apartment that he had. It was like a 1-room, 2-room
I remember
type thing. You remember? Yeah, you remember going there. Well, we were trying to think of a name.
The beer cans in the sink.
Yeah. We were trying to think of a name, and just like you say,
the albums on the ground.
When you were talking about Mirror, the way the name The Shades came up is because we just couldn't think of anything, and Bloomy just happened to have a lampshade right there, and he said, what about the Shades? And we were just so tired of trying to think of a name, we just said, all right, yeah, we're the Shades.
Kind of had dual purpose there, you know. Think of sunglasses. Yeah, it's a funny thing when you know, band names, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was my Beatle book, Irv, that I let you guys borrow.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I owe you dinner.
No, it's all right, man. Man, you got me ticket from McCartney. You don't owe me anything. I let you have
Oh,
a
that's
book,
right.
man. You let me see him live.
Hey, yeah,
So let me ask you a few
yeah,
more
man.
questions here, Irv. When
Yeah,
when
funny,
you're
man.
writing,
Sure, bro.
when you're writing, what's your process? Do you have like a usual process, or is it different all the time?
You know, lately, probably the last I guess the way technology moves and the way we're moving as a society, this is pretty frequent now. But the last 3 iPhones or 4 iPhones, you know, if I have an idea, it could be a lick. Sometimes it's a lick on the guitar. Sometimes it's a bass line, um, or some lyrics that come in my head. You know, sometimes I do have dreams, like McCartney did with Yesterday. Um, and I got to hurry up, and I look for my phone and I find it recorded. I record that, and then I'll sit down and I'll listen to it. A lot of the times when I'm on guitar, when something comes to me on the guitar, I'll record it, and then I have to hurry up and sit down and try to put something on top of it. So I grab a notepad. I try to keep stock of. I carry a lot of notebooks with me and Sharpies. I can never have enough of either of the two. So then I start writing down some of my ideas, and then I'll look at the lyrics and cross out what I don't think is working, write down what I think is more clever. And then it just kind of takes on a life of its own. Yeah.
Do you find that you write more on acoustic or electric?
It's hard to say. It's been a while since I've had an acoustic. But I grab my electric a lot, and my electric, I've always liked the sound of an electric not plugged in. Gotta kind of refresh you there.
Yeah, I was like, oh man, I lost
I'm
you.
back. So, yeah, I like the sound of an electric not plugged in. And so I grab I always have my guitar with me in the same room as me, just for that purpose. Like if I have an idea, it's right there. But so much so that when we recorded Murder for one of Augusta songs for Requiem Scott, we recorded the guitar in the studio, not plugged in, with just a mic up to it to get that sound, But yeah, either or. I find that playing with an acoustic kind of takes on it goes down a different road. Like you're more inclined, I think, to write a ballad with an acoustic. So,
Sure.
I plug it in and I crank the knob up, then it's like, start screaming.
And the recording process, do you prefer like going to a studio, or do you like how things are going today where you can record at home because of technology?
I do. I do. The thing about it is, like I said, I always had that issue with singing. Something happens where I psych myself out. And I found that this time around, I could approach things completely different. I could get a little bit more romantic, if you want to say, whatever. I can create my own atmosphere, and I can roll with it. And if I know I'm not delivering the performance I want, I can just start over. And I'm not wasting anybody's time. You know what I mean? Because when you're in the studio and you have your headphones on, I didn't like that. And you keep doing that, you kind of feel like you're kind of getting under the producer's skin. At least I do. And it could just be me. But and technology is advancing so far that I even feel like sometimes I'm not utilizing everything that's there for me. But as you know, it can feel like you got so much going on. because you got your notes you got to take, which I don't all the time. And there's just so much to it, and some people understand. I don't understand all of it. I'm not going to lie. I don't know anybody who really does. It's like you said, you're always learning something new. It's a never ending game. But yeah, I do like being in control of knowing, okay, well, I turned that dial this way. Now what happens if I turn it this way? It's a totally different thing now with everybody recording themselves. And it's just changing the name of the game. I like the concept of working with other producers, because I know that some other people can get different sounds, try things I haven't tried. I have a buddy of mine who does rap, but when I listened to his final mix, I really liked the mix he put in on his voice. So, I mean, working with other people definitely does have its advantages. The only reason
I think it's cool.
Approach this full on, by myself was. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's cool that, you
ahead,
can record at home or whatever, because it saves you the money. I mean, you got to invest the money for whatever equipment you're using, but it saves you that, $50 an hour or whatever you're going to pay at the studio. I was just talking to somebody the other day, like I was working on something recently, and I wasn't getting what I wanted, and I was like, man, this is so great that I can do this at home, because if I was in the studio paying by the hour, I probably would have just accepted like take 2 or take 3 just to save the money, and I would have accepted something that I really wasn't happy with. But I also wish, like you said, this pandemic wasn't going on, because well, of course all of us wish that, but I'm saying from the recording side, because like you said, then you could, if we were free right now, we could share our ideas with each other, so where someone could say, hey, while you're at home or you go to their house, hey, why don't you change this knob here, or why don't you try this, and so working with someone else is cool also, in that sense.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, because you know what you want now. You know what you want to hear. So now you can just sit there and do it until you got it. And on the flip side of that, if you do have a producer who just so happens to come in and say, listen to the mix I did of what you did capture that you wanted, it might turn your ear to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I like that mix of what I did. But yeah, you're right. Because the producer never knows what you're going for. He's only going to buy what you give him. He's never going to be able to say that's exactly what you wanted.
Right.
Yeah, you're dead on there. Yeah.
So Irv, how many recordings then? Let's say albums, EPs, 3-song, whatever. How many have you done? Over. I mean, it started with Mirror.
Bro,
how many have you done? All
5. So if you count Mirror, it's 5, because Mirror was 7 Years Bad Luck. Our debut album with Jagger Root, Broken, and we followed that up with Requiem Scott. Followed that up with Garage, and now One. It's been a long road, bro.
And I don't think
you remember what I was.
Yeah, and I don't think you mentioned it.
Look at what happened.
You didn't mention, I mean, you hinted at it, but you didn't fully say it. But on this new album of yours, you played all the instruments, right?
I did. And again, it goes back to, it wasn't something that I wanted to say, oh, well, I can do it all. Not at all. It was, in fact, it's the opposite. You kind of like a groundhog peeking up to see if anybody's watching. it's very intimidating. But you know, once I started getting my feet wet and going, I kind of already knew I could do it. It was just, is it going to work? You know, I wanted it to sound like a full album, and I wanted it to sound like a concrete follow-up. And because I could record what I wanted to hear and not, you know, one of the things that I hated about Broken and Record with Scott was that we were paying out of pocket. And because it's so many hours involved. A lot of people don't know what goes behind, you know, an artist saying, buy my album, you know what I mean? How many hours went into that? How much money you spent to make that album? And I was getting tired of waiting a year for the album because we couldn't pay whatever. Well, oddly enough, this album that I won took a year to make. So yeah, my mentality there didn't quite pan out, but as far as getting what I wanted, absolutely, you know, I'm really happy with the end result that, as we talked about on the last album. You know, it's their new songs, and yeah, I mean, I really feel like I'm getting what I want across, like you said. You know, wholeheartedly with everything I had. I put down what I could, and some of the things that I stepped back and said, "Oh, I'm just going to leave it like that." I was even happy with those bits. You know, and now doing this whole new, you know, approaching this video and working and doing video now. I'm excited about doing the stuff that we're going to be doing coming up. I'm very excited about it, you know, very much so.
Well, great, Irv.
I mean, I think it's
I think it's
refined of you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I want to thank you for coming out and hanging out with me here. I always,
yeah,
you know,
this was fun.
I always appreciated your music, and I always impressed by what you did, because, you know, remembering, like we were talking about before we started, growing up in the neighborhood together, and you were, you know, in that age,
yeah,
you know, a lot younger than me, even though it's not really a lot when you think now 50 and 40, yeah. But, you know, you guys were in the Munchkins or whatever, mm-hmm. And then I saw you grow to where you were recording your own music, yeah. Writing your own, I mean, you know, yeah. I remember you starting with the guitar and all that, and so then you ended up, you know, recording, and right. So I've always had a lot of respect for you for being able to do that and figured all that out, you know, and so I'm excited about your album, man. I like it. I like to listen to it, and so thanks again, Irv, man. Hopefully,
I appreciate it, bro.
You know,
thanks, man.
Looking
no
forward
problem,
to,
man. This was fun.
Little videos and other things you got coming up with it.
Absolutely, man. I'll keep you updated.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Irv, man. Take care, man.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Merry Christmas.
Later, bro.